Today is market analysis and land acquisition. I especially wanted to thank all of our sponsors, but especially wanted to point out Staged Interior and Peterson Companies for their sponsorships. And Ed, did I miss anybody?
No, I mean, you know, obviously our business partners, our President's Club, they sponsor everything that we do for the year. And so I see Van Meter here today. So special thanks to them as well. But we are getting ready to wrap up our business partner program for 2018. So if you want to sponsor and stand out, give me a shout. I can help you. I can help put you in the right places and try to earn a little extra business.
Thanks, Ed. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jerry and the rest of our distinguished panel.
Welcome. Some of the panelists are distinguished. Howard, right there.
Thank you, Jerry.
You're welcome. Welcome to everyone. I see a lot of faces from last week. My name's Jerry Berman. I'm with MI Homes, past president, MVBIA. I think I'm the only this time past president, MVBIA, but we have MVBIA board members here all the time. I guess on the panel here. What I'd like to do is give you a little bit, I'll do it quickly because I know, how many were here last week? Okay, so more than half, I think. Real quick, I started in the business 1980. Started as a controller for U.S. Home Corporation, who got bought by Lennar in 2000. So was with them for 20-some years. Wanted to get into out of accounting and into operations, and had the opportunity to do that by leaving U.S. Home. They weren't quite ready to do that, but I did get a good opportunity with a smaller builder, and I guess from 84, 83 on, I've been in the operational side of the business. So it's been longer than a lot of you are alive. But with that, move on down the line and you can hear the good stories of our other panelists.
You start with that, Ed?
No.
I don't even think so. Actually, my name's Lonnie Carter. I'm with Evergreene. Before that, I was with Syntex, and speaking of distinguished, this is one of my mentors right here, Howard Katz. And I'm an old Richmond boy, so in 1980 I was still in high school. So I was just starting high school. And moved up here in 1991 and joined Syntex probably early 2000s. And got to learn a lot from some very good people there. And then about 11 years ago, was fortunate enough during the downturn to join a couple partners that were from Syntex and NVR, and we started Evergreen Companies. Went from 6 homes, I think we did 202 homes this year, and it's been a wild ride and getting harder and harder every day. So that's about all I have.
Okay. My name's Howard Katz. I grew up in Baltimore, went to University of Maryland, got a master's in urban planning, worked for Arlington County in the early 80s, went work for a civil engineer, hooked up with a builder, was at Syntex for about 17 years, downturn, went to work for a small builder. We started a little fund, Streetscape Partners, and I've been with MVR for about 1.5 years, and I'm a regional market manager for MVR. I cover Fairfax, Loudoun, Prince William, and all points west and south. Thank you.
My name is Andrew Painter. I'm a zoning attorney at a law firm called Walsh, Colucci, Lubeley, and Walsh. We are just simply known as Walsh Colucci because the names are just too difficult to pronounce. I graduated from the University of Richmond about a little over a decade ago. Came back up here. I'm a native of Northern Virginia. When I was a kid, I used to pore over those ADC street atlases, and I would sneak away in my parents' car and just drive out to seeing all these new subdivisions in Loudoun and in Prince William, and including Fair Lakes back during my teens. I got a job working for the Board of Supervisors while I was in high school, and that continued while I was in college, and got a master's in urban planning like Howard did. And I went to the University of Virginia before going to law school, and then worked almost exclusively in Loudoun County when I moved up here, just doing work, on rezonings on all the different, jurisdictions around. But over time, my wife and I settled in Falls Church, and I've developed a pretty robust practice as well in Reston and the balance of Fairfax County. So that's kind of what I do.
So who's distinguished? The one with the most gray hair.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank
well.
you very much, Jerry.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you, Jerry.
Definitely a pleasure.
Thank you.
Last session, we went over just the general building industry. What do home builders look like? How do they operate? Who works at a home builder? Who works with home builders? This session, we're going to go over probably the most important single item that home builders do, and that's buy land. We mentioned last week that the greatest opportunity for profit and the greatest opportunity for loss lies in the land. Make a good land buy and you could screw up a lot of other things. Not that we ever do that, but occasionally we do. Because there's a lot of moving parts in the whole process. But if you make a good land buy, it covers a lot of territory on profit. You make a bad land buy, and it could put you out of business. Depending on the size of your company, like we mentioned last week, there was a national company that I think it was last year, might have been the year before, wrote off in this market, in a Maryland job, they bought 120, I forget if it was 120 or 140 million dollars, one deal. Now, there's not a lot of companies that could do that and stay in business. So land acquisition is clearly the most critical part of our business. Next session, we'll be going over land development, another area that they're big dollars. You buy the land, but then you may spend $30, $40, $50, $100,000 per lot to develop the land so that you could build houses, per lot. Anywhere in that range, you make a mistake and it could be a huge mistake. Not easy to fix. If you put the sewer and if it's off by 3 inches or 6 inches, that could cost you $100,000, $200,000 to fix. Bad dirt, hundreds of thousands of dollars to get over. So it's pretty important that you do a good job at land acquisition. Or land development. That's next week. And then the final session the week after will be about the nuts and bolts of building homes, selling homes, taking care of customers. And a little bit about the financials, which tells the story at the end. How much money do you have left at the end of the day? So we thank you all for coming. Once again, let's see if we can get a raise of hands. How many people work for home builders in the room? So, fair number in the group. How about for engineering companies? Probably a few more. Last week we didn't ask, but how about suppliers, subcontractors? Got a couple. What else we missing? We have lawyers. Yep, we got one up here and a couple back there.
Real estate sales.
Anybody on land? We'll talk over there.
He's leaving early. You get a quick invite. We're all looking for land. Well, it sounds like a good group. And one last thing before we get started on the program. Questions. Just butt in. Raise your hand if you're polite. Not everybody has to be polite though. Ask questions because we're speaking about what we think would be interesting for you to know, but there may be other things you want to talk about. And someone here on the panel is going to be able to help, I think. And I must say we have someone new to the industry sitting on the front row here. Clark Massey just started a couple years ago.
Started dabbling a couple years ago.
1800s, and probably knows more than all of us combined, but is gracious enough to come and says, you know what, there's always something new you can learn. Just hear one thing that helps you and it's all good. So we're glad to have you here, Clark. So, but really, ask questions. Don't be bashful and afraid to butt in. So with that, I'll turn it over to Howard, who's actually put this slide presentation.
It's a collective effort. Which button moves this thing forward? Who's the audio-visual guy? You do it. Beautiful. There we go. I'm moving forward. Well, good morning.
Do you need the mic?
No, do not need the mic. I don't think I need the mic. Happy Fat Tuesday. We should have had hurricanes and all that other stuff here, beads, but Jerry messed that one up, so we'll let Jerry take the fault. Land acquisition. Okay, what is it? So, everyone says real estate and land is all about location, location, location. That's obviously a big piece of it, but I look at land acquisition as being opportunistic. It's matching a creative, instinctive vision to transform an idea to reality, which is supported by market research. So you see a piece of property, you're driving down Route 50, Route 7, 29, throughout, and you see a piece of vacant ground, you say, wow, why is this property still vacant? And you start to get a vision of what you think that property should be. Well, that's the part, that's the vision or the opportunity that you might see. But the key to this is the market research piece. It's the key element to Land Act. Now I have my land use and zoning attorney next to me on my right, and he will tell you that zoning and land use are probably the key elements of land acquisition, and that's true. It is the guide. You need a land use plan, and you need zoning to implement a land use plan. So that's key to getting your projects approved. But market research really is the guide that tells you what product can I build there? Who's my competition? Do I have resale competition? Who are my direct competitors? Should it be townhomes? Should it be condos? Should it be single-family detached homes? What are the opportunities? What are the niches? And obviously, when you get into the finance piece, you talk to Jerry about how do I get this thing approved by corporate as a division president. Land acquisition process builds from the market research and the analysis that reveals buyers' needs and the market opportunity. Again, this is the strategic part of land acquisition. It's understanding where are the niche opportunities and why am I going to target an entry-level buyer, a first-time buyer, second-time, whatever the case may be for that piece of property. So it's a little scientific. We're talking about behavioral sciences. We're talking about target buyers meeting target product and finding the needs and wants of that buyer. So market analysis in the past, the traditional approach that we all kind of know and love. We see a piece of property again, we're driving along, and we say, that looks like a pretty nice piece of dirt. And we look at the zoning and land use, we find out what it may be planned for, but we choose a product that we think would work on the property. We understand the land use, the land cost, the permit fees, and we base our feasibility on the site on absorption patterns and third-party market research. Some of the third-party market research that we use, the Myers Group provides us with Zonda, which gives us information on our direct competitors, the Evergreens of the world, the Lennars, the Richmond Americans, the K-Hobbs. The Metro study gives us backup information, which I'll show you in a minute. And then you have MRIS, which gives you the resale data and how you're competing against the resales in the market. You look at your market research reports, and you price your product based on your costs, how am I going to make money, and typically you try and back into a land price, because you see this piece of real estate, you really don't know who owns it. Maybe you've done some research, you found out, but it's not listed. You have to back in and try and figure out what can I pay for that piece of real estate in order to make money based on building houses and selling houses. Typically, realistically, there is a seller and they will have an offering price for that piece of property. And then you get your project approved, and you deploy basically a shotgun approach to drive traffic to the site and sell your product. That's sort of the traditional approach to land acquisition, construction, marketing, and sales. I'd like to take another view of it, and that's the opportunistic side. I kind of look at it more strategically, and the goal here is really to identify the underserved target buyer segments. Again, is it an entry-level buyer? Is it a first-time buyer, second-time, an empty nester buyer? What are their preferences and what are their willingnesses to pay? And you define the consumer profile by the stage of life they're in. What are their needs and wants, and what's their willingness to pay? How much income do they have? So you may be looking at that piece of real estate, and you've looked at some of the market research reports, and you'll find out what is the consumer demand for that property, and will my target buyer meet the supply? Is there too much supply? Is it oversupplied or undersupplied? So you pursue the land, you develop your suitable target segments for that site, and you price your products to the market, and you start to draw high qualified traffic to the site by really doing target marketing. You've done all this research up front, you've defined your consumer profile, you know what your pipeline is, you know who's building in your submarkets, and you really you've taken more of a scientific approach, and you can find the niche. So now you've got the actual target product meeting the target market, and if you do that correctly, you'll get pricing power in the market, you'll have lower risk, you'll have higher velocity with regard to absorption rates, you'll have a sustainable competitive advantage against your direct competitors. This is a fact-based analysis and consumer-driven. It's really understanding your market, understanding your consumers. And this strategic marketing approach is something that you don't have to do quarterly or annually. You can do this probably on a 2 to 3 or 4 year basis, but it's good to update your market research, update who your consumers are in the various submarkets. We break Fairfax County, Prince William County, Loudoun County. Again, Metro Study helps us break it down by submarkets. So within Fairfax, there might be 5 or 6 submarkets. There's a Route 1 submarket. There's a Kingstown, the Kingstown-Alexandria submarket. There's a Fairfax submarket. There's a Reston submarket. Same thing in Loudoun County. You basically have a Route 7, a Route 50, the toll road, and then Western Loudoun. So you can break your submarkets down and really gain the market information for each submarket to understand who the buyer is within those locations. Again, you're breaking down the geography, you break down the product type, the square footage of product, and the understanding the buyer profiles and the demographics. So the basic questions to be asked during the market analysis phase, okay, where am I going to build? What am I going to build? So where am I going to build? What submarket am I building in? What am I going to build? What's the product? Is it towns? Is it single family detached? Is it condos? Is it a villa product? For whom am I building the product? Is it a move down buyer? Who's the target buyer segment? Trying to get the norm for each. You don't want to try and design, you can design product and say, well, I'm going to design a single family detached house, and I'll put a first floor master in it, so maybe I can grab maybe a move down buyer, or maybe an in-law suite, and upstairs I'll have 3 bedrooms and 2 baths, and I'll get the family buyer. Or the same thing for a townhome. You might design a townhome. You don't want to put an elevator in a townhouse because you think it's going to be empty nester buyer. You want to design for the norm, unless you've done your target market research and you understand that there's a move down buyer in that submarket who wants a townhouse, who's willing to pay the additional $50,000 for that elevator in that townhouse. So, and then the price, what are they willing to pay? You're looking at your submarkets, you understand townhomes sell from $500,000 to $700,000. Single family houses sell from $750,000 to $1 million. Condos are priced under $400,000. Each submarket you're defining, doing your market analysis, understanding what your price ranges are for the various products. So the first part is the data analysis phase. Again, that's going to third parties. It's going to John Burns does third party reports. Dan Fulton at John Burns, Debbie Rosenstein, or some local people that do market research. Again, Metro Study, Myers Group, MRIS. local municipalities, they have a ton of information on sales information, sales price, demographics. They're a great resource. Delta, George Mason University, there are other third-party consultants out there to provide, again, the data analysis to understand what's in the pipeline, what's out there, and what's the demand. What are my sales rates? How are they selling? How quickly are selling? At what price points? On the other side, you have the consumer insight piece. This is the strategic marketing piece. This is understanding the predictors, again, the stage of life, what the buyer wants and needs are, again, what's their ability to pay, what is their willingness to pay. And that's done through various sources, either done through focus groups or done through research, through surveys in the mail. And that really, you bring all these facts together. You're bringing the data that's provided by third parties and by municipalities, again, the supply and demand piece, with the consumer insight piece, understanding your buyers, researching your buyers, talking to your buyers to get their information. Some of the, again, resources that we use in the industry. This is Metro Study. This is a sheet-out Metro Study, data analysis dump. I was looking at the townhomes in Arlington, Alexandria, and Fairfax. So this sheet was telling me who's building in this submarket, what size product they're building. So the first column is the subdivision name. The second column is the submarket I was looking at, the status of the project, when they actually open. Again, the lot size, a 20-foot town, a 27-foot town, a 22 or 24-foot town, the price range, how many starts they've had, annual starts, closings, annual closings, and how many are occupied. And then more importantly, getting to the end, how many lots do they still control and with future lot inventory. So I'm digging into the Arlington, Fairfax, again, Alexandria submarket, because I have a piece of dirt I'd like to build on, but I want to build townhouses. So this is the first piece that I would do. I go in and research who are my competitors. Again, dig down a little bit deeper, get more project statistics on the site, drill down, what are, specifically, what's the product range, what are their sales prices, what are their absorption rates. Their close rate is the column that tells me maybe 3.4. Potomac Yard down at the bottom, Pulte, they're absorbing 3.4 units per month. They're priced from $750 to $990. Right? They recorded 40 closings. It gives me information what the average closing price is at $889, how big the house was, and their price per square foot ratio. So now I'm digging down a little bit deeper and getting into really price per square foot. And then you take this data and you can create basically a CMA. This is a competitive market analysis. This is straight from Metro Study. And this is taking all the competitors that I pulled down within the submarket, and it graphed out where they're all priced. Well, this graph tells you a quick story, right? You look at it, and everything between roughly just over 2,000 square feet, 2,500 up to over 3,000, everything was priced right between $600,000 and $900,000. So if I go back to my research, my previous research, I can take a look and say, well, what are the sales rates for those neighborhoods? And they're all absorbing, less than one a month, or maybe two a month. And then I look up and say, well, there seems to be somebody absorbing at between 3,000 and just over 3,500 at $1.2 million. Who is he? So you're looking at this marketing graph, and you're getting, this is your data analysis collection, and trying to find the niches within the submarket. It's obviously very high priced, and if I could come in with a product that's at roughly 2,500 square feet, below that, it would be great. It would be great. I'd probably do very well. I don't know who's building 3,500 to 5,000 square foot townhouses, but we'll have to look into that one. I don't know how successful they are. Who is that?
Right.
Oh yeah, that's in downtown Alexandria. I think they got like 6 townhouses. So then we overlay that with MRIS information. This is, I know it's tough to see, but MRIS is a great tool for your resale market, because you're always pricing, if your buyers coming in, they're looking at resales, they're looking at new home competition. So what can they afford? If the resales, I was using $650,000 as a close price. And this was all the resales that I could pull up in, again, this is showing everything within Fairfax County. And this was, I think, homes built after 2000, because I didn't want to pull in homes that were older than that because they wouldn't have the features or maybe the square footage that I was looking for. And that drill down told me this is just a basic grouping. It says, you know, there are 152 active listings within this submarket. The max price was 3.9, but the average is 747. And it told me the house was built in 2011, days on the market, 68 days, number of bathrooms, bedrooms, and then it gives me contingent, non-contingent, contingent, and then what's sold and the status of all. So this kind of gives me, you know, a view of the submarket, gives me information on my resale market as well as my direct competitors, my new home builders that are there. So that site in Arlington County, I start to craft my vision for this site. I now understand the demand side. How do I get to understand the consumer side of the site? So again, you've done the market side, the strategic piece of the market analysis. Again, you understand the supply. So where am I going to focus my efforts, right? That maybe that one piece didn't work out, but now I've got all this research in Arlington and Fairfax and Alexandria. How do I dig down deeper into that submarket to understand my land acquisition opportunities? You need to understand more about, again, the buyer, and that's the key to this piece, the consumer insight piece, understanding your vision to meet the needs and wants of the buyers. So at Centex back in the day, we did a large survey online and mail where we went out to residents within Fairfax County, Loudoun, Prince William, and you can do this on a smaller scale, but we sent out a survey, and through a series of questions under tree structure, we were able to bundle the similarities which would lead to the groups or clusters of the buyers within those counties. We got to understand who the buyers were within Fairfax, understanding who lives in the Reston submarket, or if they live in Fairfax, would they move to Reston, or if they lived in Oakton, would they move to Loudoun County if they had the right product. So that's part of the target market research. You can either do that online or through the mail, working with a third party to understand that, or you can do it through focus groups, the target market research through focus groups. Again, it's a way to collect data about your consumer and to ask questions, show them pictures of product, show them pictures of locations, communities, and understand the needs and wants of that buyer profile.
Let me mention one thing, that everything Howard's talking about is critical in making good decisions on buying land, but it's extremely difficult to accomplish. It's a lot of work, a lot of digging, a lot of research. Some companies are set up to be able to, they have staff that just do that, so that they have an advantage. They are able to get a lot of great data. Other companies don't have many people on staff that can do that. They may hire an outsider to do it for them because it's that important. And still some others don't do either. They go by their gut. And this is where the art of the business, mixing the three is usually what happens. But the guys and gals that are the best at it usually have a great sense when they see some land, what would work. Now they may have a lot of experience also, being in the market a long time and knowing neighborhoods really well. But there's an art to it as well as scientific or method, which this is better, but if you're also good at the art part of it, you're going to have a great advantage.
Yeah, so again, going back to that theory, we drive, we're all in the real estate business or industries associated with real estate, and you drive and you see this piece of vacant real estate. And if you're in Houston, where they basically have no zoning, you could have a gas station next to an apartment complex, next to a drive-through for a Burger King, next to a bar or restaurant. There's no rhyme or reason to Houston. But when you work in the Commonwealth of Virginia or the state of Maryland, there are comprehensive plans, there are zoning ordinances, there's a method to the madness of growth, or at least the elected founding fathers thought there was a madness to how growth should occur. Research and understanding your buyers, I believe, is the critical piece right now to really being successful in the business. There's a shotgun approach. A lot of builders do it. We're very successful at it. If you have the time to put into understanding who your buyer is and making it consumer driven. Why do we research why people buy limeade drinks or why they buy cherry Coca-Cola? I mean, a lot of what the home builders were stealing from, they're stealing from the car business, we're stealing from Frito-Lay, why people buy certain potato chips. The same thing is in the home building industry. We do this market research to understand our buyer, to understand their needs and wants. So if you do the target market research, you understand who your buyer is, and you understand why should we do this deal, you ask the questions, what community features, what should the product be, what are your standard options, what are your features, and what should my price be when I open? If you use consumer research, you should use it to drive your business strategy. And again, with regards to standards and options, follow the 80% rule. Don't try and hit 100%. Let the other 20% go to the other builders. Focus on, the core of who your buyer profile is. Don't try and be everything to everyone. If you do the first three correctly, if you understand the community, understand your product, your standard, then you'll have the success and the pricing power of the market. I know I kind of went through it kind of quick. We'll delve back into it a little bit later.
One thought, or a couple of thoughts that occurred to me while we're on the slide, and something that Jerry brought up. Number one, as I think I mentioned at the outset, I used to pore over these street atlases. I mean, my parents still think there's something wrong with me because I'm such a geek, but I love looking at the new roads that we're going in. And when we have new hires that come on board, it's very easy for zoning attorneys or for any third-party consultants to just sit behind a desk and not leave their office, right? I think it's very important for all of us in the industry, no matter what profession or what role you play, to get out there and drive. Just go out there on a Saturday, go out there during the weekdays, and don't just drive around the area that you feel comfortable in or that you do your errands in. Drive out to farther flung locales and areas and just see the different roads and see the different signs and different product type that you see out there. I think it's very important. And that way when you're counseling clients or when you're having discussions with people about a project over off of Bristow Road and or off of Gum Spring Road or in downtown Alexandria and St. Asaph, you can actually have a conversation and know what it is that they're talking about. But I think it's important to see what your competitors are doing in different areas. One other thought too, when we talk about standards and options, some of that stuff is also driven by what is politically requested of you. So one of the things in a lot of my projects now, we're not talking about large plan unit developments with thousands upon thousands of homes anymore. We're talking about 20 townhomes or 100 townhomes or 200 townhomes. But you might have political officials or elected officials that request certain options and amenities that they want to see, that they expect these new citizens of theirs to have. Most notably a pool house, most notably a clubhouse, whether you're doing universal design. These are certain things that might be requested of you that, when you're trying to set up a homeowners association or making it fiscally positive, you can't put the onus of those or the cost of those amenities on those homeowners, and so we kind of have to push back every now and again. But some of it is driven by research, but some of it is also driven by what is politically requested of you in order to get your project fully entitled and approved.
Brick front, brick sides, hardy plank rear, true divided light windows because they want to be historically significant. I mean, there are things that you wouldn't typically, you don't really. You know you want to do a brick front, but you don't really want to maybe do a hardy plank in the rear of the townhouse that the squirrels are going to see and the birds are going to see. So, but it's a good point. I'm going to flip to the next and turn it over to talk about prospecting. It's on the right.
All right, prospecting. Well, it's actually very broad, and I can kind of go through the different bullet points that Howard's laid out for us. I mean, of course, you have all these tools, GIS, handling books, supply data, internet search, Zillow, Trulia, much more. Maryland Map Finder, public records, newsletters, tax maps, reverse phone directories, cold calling, direct mail. I mean, I think the first thing when you are prospecting, you got to know who you are. I mean, I'm looking at different things than Howard's looking at, you know, and I know where we do well. So first of all is figuring out, you know, those areas that we can thrive in as a company, Evergreen, and to expand upon this, the longer you're in this business, it's actually a very small circle. All those kind of hang together like the old Bugs Bunny commercials, you know, or cartoons. You know, during the day we're fighting each other out, at night, you know, we go talk about it, anything but land acquisition. But but the prospecting is just from anywhere. I mean, you know, you never know, and as you go through it, you're looking for things like school districts. I mean, it'd be amazing things we do in Vienna, how one street over could be 200,000 more per house. So when you're prospecting, and the counties have done a great job updating their information, Fairfax and different things, and you go in there, I mean, you got to look and be able to talk to pretty much anyone. You're talking to buyers that are calling off your signs because they see your building. You're talking to the Clark Massey's who's found something before you, and you just don't have time to do it all. So engineers, lawyers, relationships, and all this stuff together helps you be able to prospect. And
yeah, I think the important part that Lonnie made is the strategic market research piece of this prospecting. Again, Evergreen is building high-end single-family as well as high-end townhomes and doing some condos, and they know what markets they want to build in, so they are targeting those specific areas. They understand their buyer profile, they know who they are, they understand that schools are very important to them. For an MVR, we're maybe a little broader base. We have an entry-level buyer, a first time, a second time, we have an empty nester. So our strategic marketing approach may be a little broader. We're in Fairfax, we're in Loudon, we're in Stafford, so overall we're in different markets. Schools are important, don't get me wrong, but so is location and price. So that's the important piece to this prospecting. I mean, it's tough to cover the entire world. You want to be strategic, use your time and use your focus to understand where you want to build or buy or looking for land.
Yep, and have a tool pretty much that you can run some decent numbers. It's all a math problem. Sellers always want more money than it's worth, and you know, it's that happy, and it's hard to kind of start, you know, and I'll get into this later, but as far as the prospecting, yeah, I mean, I think pretty much anybody can be a resource. I mean, if you're always talking to people, and even if it's a 30-minute meeting, you might see them 3 years later when they're still shopping the same land or they know somebody else. So it's relationships, you know, it's keeping in touch, being at these kind of meetings, keeping in touch with the lawyers as you work with them. You find out different things. You can, you know, and you can see how the municipality is. Sometimes you just don't want to waste your money when you just don't know what you're going to end up with. So you got to weigh that all out. So, and even with other builders, you know, I know Howard, if he found something that wasn't going to fit his profile, he would give me a call and we could talk if he thought it was perfect for us. Same for them, you know. So that would be good. All right, thank you. So, so politicians, very important. I mean, you know, you go talk to them right away. The thing you got to be careful is they might be able to say one thing, but as you go through the process, there's a lot of people involved. The land use attorney helps you guide yourself through that, and you have to get a feel of what you think they're going to improve. Doesn't always mean they are, but they can at least give you you know, there's always a strategy to how you attack these things, and politicians play a major part in it to even get it started. County agent planners, I mean, before you even get to the politicians, that's kind of, you know, you're going through these people. Attorneys, they're helping to steer you through the processes to, you know, make sure you're making all the meetings, making sure you're getting all your paperwork right, and then just taking you through it, trying to get you, as we're negotiating, dare I say, proffers and different things like that. Brokers, you know, some people, you know, brokers sometimes see deals you see. You know, everybody's your friend, and it's all a math problem. So you really can't worry about how the money's being divvied up if you're paying from it for it. So brokers, you know, that's all they're focused on. So there's a lot of good brokers out there, and the more educated they are to bring them to you, the more, you know, you'll take their call. So that's a very good thing. Land developers, same thing. We have people, I mean, and Howard, these guys, they do a great job of bringing different developers into the equation. You know, land development is one of the biggest things. I mean, when I talk to a prospect, the two biggest things that you cannot tell them is by the time you get there what that house will sell for. You can argue, you can tell them what it'll sell for today. And then land development. There's so many different layers to it that if you really aren't on top of that, you know, just a few things can cost you lots of money.
The prospecting is ongoing. It's every day. You never know who you're going to talk to. Again, it could be your neighbor. It could be maybe talking to, again, an attorney, another person in the business, a broker. And some of this prospecting could take months with a seller to finally get him to understand. Again, you're trying to educate. You're educating your seller, because a lot of sellers think they understand what their piece of property may be worth and understand the land use and understand the zoning, but maybe they don't understand the entitlements. They don't understand the proffer legislation that the builders are facing. So it takes a long time, a lot of hand holding, and probably some money along the way, because you're going to be doing some work along the way to, again, help educate that land seller.
Yep, exactly. And then, you know, obviously MBBA having us here, but they're a great resource. A lot of people, when they don't know where else to call, they'll pick up the phone and call them. And MBA from Maryland. And again, I think I mentioned it earlier, but all contacts in the business. I mean, it's amazing where a land seller might start, you know, especially if it's a land seller that only has one piece of land. Now, I'm not talking like the professional land sellers that buy and flip, which is a whole nother aspect, but you don't know. I mean, even an architect has brought me a deal before. I mean, because they have a relationship. And it really comes down. That is the biggest key. Is that last sentence that Howard put together, land acquisition is a relationship business? It really is. I mean, you know, we always fight at the first, you know, to try to educate the seller, but then there's a fine line. How much can you negotiate before you know all the answers? So we'll go into that next on how that moves along, but relationship is key. It's a relationship with the sellers, it's a relationship with all the people we mentioned before, and so that's one thing you always have to remember.
And just to underscore that point, your reputation in this business is important. This is a revolving door. There are people that start at one company and they move to 10 different companies before they retire. There are people that you know that you can do business with, people you don't trust. Fortunately, I think the majority of people in our business and in our organization are fairly trustworthy. There are a few bad apples, but you need to be transparent and honest with people. That's the bottom line, because your reputation will follow you. So.
I want to add on to that is a critical aspect of building a long-term career, is having people trust you, that they know when you say something that it's true, that you're not going to change your mind or you're not going to renege on what you said. So if you don't know something, you say, I don't know, I have to find out, or I need someone else to approve that. I think we can get it done, but I'm not 100% sure. I'll get back to you, and then get back to them. Your reputation is critical at you being successful in the land acquisition or most other parts of our business.
All right, so going back, running the numbers, and I brought in, this is just a dashboard of running the numbers. I always like to say everything's a math problem. Pretty much in life, it pretty much is. So everything's a math problem, and so the more information you know about, you know, the definites that you can put in there is great. Some things, like I said, land development, you know, you have to, you just really got to dig in and have the professionals that know about dirt, because there's so many aspects to it. But then I'll just go down this list. So, you know, the house type, you know, right away, you can find out, it doesn't matter if you're doing one lot or several lots, you know what the zoning is, you can look in, you have a relationship with the engineer. They're putting that footprint together, and, you know, with us, we probably have a lot more house types, so to fit all the different niches we do. At Syntex, we didn't have near as many, and we, you know, and companies, that is the key, is if you can keep building the same thing, get efficiencies, it's awesome. So it's how you get efficiencies with that house type. Number of lots, that varies for every company. You know, for us, we do a lot of one-offs. We do a lot of 7 and 8 and 9 unit deals, especially in the Fairfax, Arlington area. Most likely for us, if it's going to be 30, 40 lots, and a lot of the other builders, that's, you know, that's enough where they can use those efficiencies. You know, we know enough not to, you know, we'll go in there, we'll give it a good old try, but you know, we're not pushing hard for that. The estimated timing for entitlement engineering approvals, this is huge. Right now in Prince William County, I live in Gainesville, so I know it very well, and I've had a rezoning going since 2006 out there, and the school board's getting involved now. And, you know, transportation's an issue. We're going through a small plan out there. But when the school board starts weighing in on rezonings, and I think Walsh Colucci's going through some battles out there that haven't gone the way in the past. We don't have enough schools. My son's 17 and 16. They're in trailers after Patriot was built, and the next high school is 3 years. Knowing all that stuff is very, very important. When you go into Arlington, you got to know what you're facing, you know. And it's so much with entitlement engineering approvals. It's what each county and each supervisor, you know, you start to get a feel of what they, you know, what their appetite is. And a lot of it, you won't even know until they have the public hearings. If there's a lot of opposition, but you kind of see ahead.
To give you an example, in Maryland right now, Howard County and Anne Arundel County school boards, and then the county board of supervisors are considering and have passed a moratorium on building if you don't have enough school capacity. So if you don't know going in before you buy some land what the school capacity is in that jurisdiction, you could buy the land and find out 6 months later you're not allowed to, you won't get a building permit. You might sit on the land for 3 years, 5 years, until there's enough school capacity. If you don't know that up front, potential for big trouble. Although it's a lot of stuff to know. Your attorneys, they know you. So you got to get advice. It's important.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, knowing each of those pockets, what's happening, keeping up with the, you know, the county letters, and then land development costs, proffers, and impact fees. That's been an interesting thing over the last year and a half, I guess now, that, you know, with the law coming out, you know, what that law meant. Christopher Companies was going to be we were going to find out in Fairfax, but they finally, it's the proffers right now is a big question mark. You know, some of the counties are doing better identifying those areas where you can go forward. You know, you just got, again, with your land use attorney and everything, that's a very important part of this, and impact fees. Brick and mortar costs, those things get updated constantly. You're also going to have to kind of figure out, you know, when you're doing it. I mean, on this pro forma, I got exact cost of the house, you know, how much to finish the basement, all that, and that's one of those numbers that we can guarantee, you know, and then the debt and interest and all that you go through. But, you know, when you brick and mortar costs, you know, that's a big component to put it in the math problem. Marketing cost, you know, pretty much we allocate a certain marketing budget to each unit. It's the best way to do it, or for us at least.
Could
County
you back it up just 1 second?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm still thinking on the school board capacity. So where do you find that information? Is that just something that you can go onto the GIS and it's a layer, or?
You talking about the actual, how the schools are,
In Howard County, they actually have a report. So they list all the subdivisions that have approval. You get into a queue, so you can get this report from the county, and it's broken down by sub-markets within Howard County. Some sub-markets within Howard County are open for schools, and others are over capacity. So you found that piece of property, you have that vision for the site, and during your due diligence or early on in the process, one of the keys in Howard County is understanding if there's school capacity. So the municipality is keeping tabs for you, and they're the gatekeeper for that information.
But just reading the newspaper, you see that next Tuesday night there's a public meeting about whether or not they're going to close areas because of schools. You say, uh-oh, what's that all about? And you start digging.
Or if you're in a school division like Prince William, Fairfax, or Loudoun, you can call their respective divisions of legislative services. They'll provide that information to you.
and again, that's where the politicians come into play as well. I mean, usually the politician who the project will fall in, the other, you at least got to have them before you have any hope a lot of times to get the rest of the board to vote. And they'll tell you, I mean, straight up in Prince William right now, it's a huge deal. I think there's been a couple rezonings that just didn't go through because the school board showed up, and now and again, I live out there, so I have that knowledge, but you can pick up the papers and talk about, this high school's 187 at capacity, this one's, 140, and then another one's not gonna be built for 3 years. And they don't even know where the next one's gonna be built, so.
And in Virginia, moratoria are illegal as far as land development. We don't have adequate public facilities ordinances. But the way that the land use law situation has been in the Commonwealth over the past, I guess since 1978, has really been that they can deny you for any issue. And it may be adequate school capacity is actually one of the issues, or they just may not like the design, or it might be transportation issues. I think whatever the issues happen to be, that's why it's very important to drill down to understand what's going on in the district in which you're operating, the magisterial district, the election district. Talk to the supervisors and get to have your ear to the ground as far as what the concerns really are.
What was the school impact fee, or what was the school impact fee in Loudoun or back in the day?
Well, the school impact fee, this goes back to proffers, but some jurisdictions will give you a schedule, a list of anticipated proffers that you're supposed to fork over basically with each unit. So in Prince William County, here's your fire and rescue contribution, here's your transit contribution, here's your school contribution, and that can add up to about $40,000 per home. Loudoun was even higher than that, and so what they would have is a capital impact facility fee anywhere between, say 36 and about 55,000, of which 70% of that, 75% of that was just for schools.
So part of the problem as we move forward and try and find, one of the reasons why the proffer law and what happened in July 1, 2016 is we were questioning the jurisdictions. We were paying all these fees that were supposed to be going towards schools to build schools, and we couldn't get an answer. Oh, I shouldn't get into this, should I? We're going to move on. I'm going to move on.
We're running over. So
Let's move on.
So
Click forward. Click forward.
So you don't you're going in, you're buying this land, but you say you're in a new area, and you don't know what you don't know. Especially if you're new in the business, and, you have relationships maybe, but you don't know these people or anything really all that well. So if you're starting out brand new, and you want, I guess, to minimize the risk on the politicians and all that, I'm guessing your best friend on your team that you would have to get would probably be your land use attorney. Is that true? Who would have all the information to mitigate that upfront risk?
They're deeply into it because they get the plans approved. They create the plans that show enough open space or this or that, and the attorneys. But if you're brand new into it, you don't want to be buying land generally.
Yeah.
You gotta know a little something more before you jump into that big arena.
Some of the best deals we've all done is the ones we didn't do. So,
No question. We were talking before, and we were saying, when we introduce ourselves, we were saying, and each of us might want to say, would you have gotten into this business knowing what you know now? If we were going to say, but then when we really talked about it, even with the ups and downs, we all said, we love it.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult, and if you don't love it, don't get into it.
Yeah.
Exactly. And have a lot of people around you that can support you.
You bet.
I mean, we're the relationship for the most part, guy, you know.
I called Howard a couple days ago, a competitor who I know for a long time because I knew he did a lot of business in Montgomery County over the years, and we hadn't done a lot of business. I had a question for him about the Parks and Planning Commission and what they're going to require from us and what we could push back on, and he was good enough to give me his advice. But the relationships, it's real important, and you use them. And you give back.
And in this area, pretty much, I mean, we, you know, it's just like Frederick, Maryland, all these other places. Years ago, we wouldn't even have thought about it, but, you know, pretty much everything's been looked at. It's just finding that price point. Can you build it? Can the landowner get enough money? And these deals stay around for a long time. So, the pace and sales pricing, that's very important. You know, it used to be a rule at Syntex, if you're selling 2.5 homes of a product line in the neighborhood, you're doing pretty well. If you were selling 4, your price probably too low, etc. Overhead financing, you got to know your company, debt and equity. I think we're getting that on the next page, so I'll get a little more into that. Submitting a letter of intent, and the letter of intent, you know, it's not a binding. I think it says at the bottom of every one, it's not binding. But when you've been negotiating back and forth, and us four could be negotiating in a room, bottom line, we all might understand things a little differently. So before you go into the cost of the attorneys and all that, you want to make sure you're on the same page. And a letter of intent, usually 2 pages, outlines it, gives you a little time so you can get to a contract. Purchase price, bulk or per lot price, raw or finished. Again, to your point, I think she left, but when you're trying to figure things out, I mean, you know, we say every time a house gets pushed out on closing, it costs us $500 or whatever a day. So that purchase price, bulk or per lot price, raw or finished, that's all part of the math problem. You know, if somebody can bring a finished lot to you, you look at it, and if you have to develop it, you have to look at that, and so on.
Let me just, to put a broad blanket over it, what a letter of intent is what you are telling the seller you want to do. And it's the general terms. And the more you put in there, the more comfortable the seller is going to be with you. You could say, hey, I'll buy this within the next 6 months, and I'll pay you this between this range, depending on how many lots you get. Or you can get very detailed, which puts you in a position where the seller believes, if they trust you, that you're someone better to deal with than the guy next to you who's real wishy-washy. But most important with your letters of intent, when you write something down and you send it to a seller, you mean it. There's some companies that will send a letter to a seller and they put whatever they think they got to put in that letter to get the deal. So they might know that they can't pay $4 million for this property. They might know they can only pay $3.5 million. They'll send a letter at $4 million because they know that the seller will really like that, and then you go off into the next step of negotiating a contract, and then when you're getting close to the end, that builder who doesn't have necessarily a good reputation will say, hey, you know what, we just figured out we can't give you $4 million. Well, now the seller's in a spot where they just wasted a month or 2 with you. You get a bad reputation. Mean what you say.
You don't want to retrade the deal.
You know, that's called
Right, so the
retrade.
seller's receiving several letters of intent on this piece of real estate. You've driven past this site, you know it's a great property, well located. There's a listing, there's a sign on it. Clark Massey has the listing. He gets all the letters of intent, and there's an outlier. This guy's at $4 million. Everybody else is at 3.5, 3.4. So the smart broker will discount the $4 million offer. He'll throw that one out, where he'll have a conversation with the buyer and say, your letter of intent says X. Can you explain your numbers to me? So hopefully you have a reliable broker who's selling the piece of real estate for you. But again, if you're dealing with just a landowner who isn't very educated with regards to real estate, he might take the higher offer because he sees the number and doesn't realize what's going to happen. Again, to Andrew's part, you don't want to retrade, you don't want to get that reputation in the market.
And back to the relationship, key word, the letter of intent's kind of the, you've already built up a relationship. If you're getting to a letter of intent and they accept your letter of intent, you want to have as much good information. I even educate them on a couple of the parts that could change, because you don't know. But I've had many people go through 3-4 contracts, and it's the part of the relationship is, you might educate them and kind of show them what it is, but they're always, if somebody's promising them more, it's human nature to go for that. But when that doesn't work out, if you keep that relationship and comfortably can come back and talk to you, you get a second or a third or a fourth shot at it.
All the time.
Happens all the time. And the condition clause. So I think that's enough about a letter of intent, because it's going to go right into the prepare the purchase and sales agreement. And so that's where you take that letter of intent and you go into it. And the better your letter of intent is, the easier this process goes. For us, we have templates pretty much for every kind of purchasing situation. We try to keep it to 12, 13 pages, where when we were with Syntex, they were 50, 60 sometimes, depends on the deal. But what we found is, this is where, having those templates that you can send over pretty much right away, it keeps the cost down if they've been thought out and vetted out over many deals. The seller will appreciate it. They'll appreciate the lack of hours, but then you kind of cut to the chase. But
For MVR, we buy finished lots. So all I care about is hazardous materials and clear title, because I'm going to push all the other requirements onto my developer, who's going to develop the lots for me and sell me back lots. He's going to have to deal with all the land development costs, the engineering expenses, and everything that goes into it. So typically, you've got your LOI signed, you've gotten your purchase agreement signed, you go into your feasibility. Feasibility doesn't start until you have an executed contract, but you can still use that time while you're negotiating the contract to do some more due diligence. Typically, you have a kickoff meeting. You bring the various departments together, your various consultants, your legal team at Walsh to help you on the land use and zoning aspects. You have your civil engineers, your geotech consultants, environmental consultants. You bring together your architects, your planners, who's going to design the product, your costing managers, your purchasing managers, and your sales and marketing managers. So during the feasibility period, probably the first thing is you're working with your civil engineer to come up with a land plan that works, and then you're probably sending your geotech consultant out to the field to do some borings, some test pits to understand your costs, and then you've got your product, you've understood, you've done your market research, you understand who your target market buyer is, you know what product you want to build there, and your costing manager moves forwards and puts together his costing. Next slide. So now you're getting in, you're compiling the Land Act package for your approval, whether it's an internal approval by your division president, or you're going to corporate, you're going to Pulte down in Atlanta or wherever their corporate offices are, and you have to submit it to corporate or a regional office. Or maybe you just submit it to, maybe your division president has the authority to approve the acquisition. You put together the land acquisition summary, again, which includes all your market-specific research, again, all your home building competition, how you're going to be priced against the competition. You know your land development costs. You've met with your engineer. You've gone to a third party. They've done a cost analysis on water, sewer, storm, earthwork. Moving dirt is your biggest cost in any land development operation. Moving dirt is very expensive, so you understand your dirt moving again, as well as your wet and dry utilities. Your brick and mortar costs, your purchasing manager has costed out. This is a house you've built over and over and over. You have really good cost data on your house. Again, you put together your pro formas, you submit it. You have various scenarios. What if the market isn't really good, and I got to figure out how do I get out of this deal as quickly as possible. You have an exit strategy. Maybe you reduce your sales prices, increase your pace to get out of the site quicker because your debt and your interest is eating you alive. Or maybe you have a very aggressive strategy. You're going to be able to move prices up because you're selling houses faster than you think. Or maybe you just have sort of just your low volume where you're just going to move through it at 2.5, 3 a month. The land acquisition manager is the point person responsible for preparing the package and making the submission. The key here is whatever deposit you're posted during your letter of intent, during your contract, is refundable. If you get back from your land committee and you do all this work for 60 days and your division president says, you know what, you're not meeting your margin thresholds, your return on equity thresholds, your IRR thresholds, either go back and renegotiate your contract and get a lower lot price, or change your product, you're building your house is too big, and you try to renegotiate, or maybe you just say, you know what, I'm not going to do this deal, and your deposits refund back to you, and you move on to the next acquisition.
If I can interject, two things to underscore. One, the time period between the time the LOI is executed and the time that you actually get to full ratification of the purchase and sale agreement could be 8 weeks. It could be longer than that. You should use, and then as Howard says, the feasibility period typically doesn't start until after you have full ratification of the contract and you hit go. So you can use that time to be doing a lot of this stuff, so you're not losing time, because almost every deal you are working up against the end of that clock for the feasibility period. That's one thing. Number two, if you have zoning questions, sometimes in order to close on a property, purchasers want to see an official zoning confirmation letter, or there might be zoning questions. Do not wait until 5 days before your feasibility period expires to call up your zoning council and say, I need a letter from the county, because that can take weeks to get. And then we got to play a bunch of blue chips to be able to get a quick response. And the last thing I'll say on this too, just underscoring, make sure you know who has responsibility for your approvals, who has to approve the deal. I've seen a couple deals recently fall through where we're moving forward, we've met with people, everything, and then all of a sudden there's a couple new folks that are taking this deal through that didn't know they had to get division approval or some other corporate approval. So make sure you understand that chain of command.
Or the guy that works down the hall from you who signs your paycheck every day.
Exactly. And only one point I would say is these 90 days, we all have extended feasibilities. But if you're aligning goals and depending on what threshold some sellers just don't care, they want to hear anything, show up with what your contract is or go home. But a lot of them, I mean, listen, this is educational. This is where you can build a lot of that trust up. And even if they end up at the end of the day not going with you, at some point, it might come back to where your numbers were right. And they might be back in your door. So you want to take those 90 days seriously. It's probably the most critical thing once you have it under contract. And like to Andrew's point right here, you know, if you've already done a lot of upfront work that says on paper it's going to work. Now you're just backing it up. So.
All right, Andrew.
So entitlement process, this is where we get the green light to pull together a team, or the developers pull together a team, and our clients are ready to submit an application. So in this case, if you're going for rezoning, if you're going for a special exception, depending on what jurisdiction you're in, if you're going in just for a straight subdivision, this is where we start the clock. And this goes back to the contingencies to closing that you might have in your LOI or in your purchase and sale agreement. Typically what you see is that there is a contingency closing that a purchaser shall not be liable for purchasing this property until they have a rezoning approval or a final unappealable site plan or preliminary site plan from the jurisdiction, allowing them to do what it is that they want to do. And this process is extremely cumbersome. It's fraught with political realities. You're dealing with community if it's a public process, and you're going before the boards of supervisors or town or city councils, depending on where you are. But this is a long process. If you have to rezone a piece of property, you're looking at about a year, maybe longer, 15 months to get to an official vote by the local jurisdiction. And so this is ultimately allowing you to go through and actually build and sell homes. And I'll say one other thing too. As land has gotten less and less available, as the supply of land has gone down, the dollar signs in sellers go up, up, up. And everyone needs to understand that all of us on both sides of the equation have an interest in maximizing the highest and best use of this property. You know, None of my clients want to sit back and lowball an offer as far as a seller simply because we want to say, oh, well, we want to build fewer homes. I mean, my clients typically need to employ people. We want to build houses. That's what we're all about. And so that needs to be made clear to sellers. But as it says on the second bullet point, this is a time-consuming process. We're dealing with architects, engineers, geotechs, traffic consultants. We are dealing with constant meetings in the public realm. We're dealing with community citizen meetings, and it really depends on which jurisdiction you operate in. It's important to know that if you are in a jurisdiction like Fairfax, which is very mature as far as its land development process, you have a number of supervisors that will defer to the home district supervisor. So if you're dealing with Fairfax, for example, you have to meet 90% of the time with one supervisor, and if he or she says this is a go, I like this project, great, and you have to deal with one planning commissioner. If you're dealing in a jurisdiction that's a little bit less evolved, like Loudoun County, where they're kind of caught between a small jurisdiction and a large jurisdiction as far as population growth, you have to deal with all of the planning commissioners. You got to meet with all of them. Then once you get through the planning commission, you got to do the circuit again and meet with all the supervisors, those that will meet with you. So it's important to know the jurisdiction in which you operate as well.
Can you describe why would you get land zoned? What's the reason for zoning? Is there stuff you don't have to get zoned?
Yeah.
And what is a preliminary plan versus a final plan?
Yeah, I mean, there's really two. I mean, there's two ways to look at a piece of property. One is its by right potential, right? So if you have 100 acres, for example, and it happens to be zoned R1, say, one house per acre, you know, you could move forward immediately and just file it for a subdivision plan. And you don't need to go through a public process. Keep in mind, though, in some jurisdictions, subdivision plans and site plans are approved by the planning commission, or in some cases, they're actually approved by the local government body. So even though it's supposed to be a ministerial approval for a by right subdivision, you're still having to go through a public hearing process. It looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, but it's actually ministerial in nature. And if you go through that ministerial process, again, site plan or subdivision, if you check off the box, you know, if you follow all of the ordinances, at least under Virginia law, you know, you have your north arrow in the right place, you've got the square footages, you've got everything the way it's supposed to be, you are supposed to be approved. Okay, so that kind of takes a lot of the guesswork out of when you have a contingency to closing in your purchase and sale agreement, because you've already gotten through sort of the tougher part, which is the unpredictable political process. If you have to go through a rezoning or any other type of legislative process, then you are in the public arena. And what you're typically doing there is taking that 100 acres, which could otherwise sprout 100 homes under its existing R1 zoning, and you're wanting to double it or triple or quadruple the amount of housing that you can actually put on it. And that takes a rezoning. And when you're going through the rezoning, that is a public policy process. There, you know, local officials are allowed by our courts to inject their subjective determination as to whether or not they like the project. And they can base their decision as to whether or not they're going to approve you for that higher density on things like the comprehensive plan, things like whether there's adequate school capacity, whether there's adequate transportation capacity, any number of issues they can rely on, and they'll know that it'll be held up in court. And so it really is a political process. Once you get through the zoning entitlement, assuming you get approved for higher density, then you do move into your subdivision and site plan process, which again is a ministerial process. Again, sometimes it's approved by the building department. In smaller jurisdictions like the City of Falls Church, it's approved by the planning commission. So it depends on where you're at.
Closing the property. Jerry, are you talking about closing the property or
Closing on the property?
closing on the property?
You could talk.
Well, while you're finding that out, let me say one other thing. You may have signed a letter of intent for a certain number of homes, and these or a contract for a certain number of homes, such as we will pursue a rezoning to get 400 homes on your 100-acre property. Okay, but during the process, you don't get out of this process without somebody extracting a pound of flesh, and you might get knocked down from 400 homes to 250 homes. You've got to go back and revisit that agreement, and either you end up as a purchaser and seller kind of walking away from the deal because it's just not financially feasible, or you're actually able to negotiate something else where everybody feels okay about it. So,
Yeah, and I think to think about all the time when you're dealing with land acquisition and this approval process and getting the land ready to build homes is risk. It never leaves your mind if you're doing your job right, because every step along this way can make a deal good or bad, depending on how much information you have and how much you know how good your team is, how well connected you might be with the jurisdiction, friends with the county supervisors. They know this builder does an awesome job, builds great neighborhoods. We want that builder here. They might know this builder does a lousy job, and oh my God, we get all these homeowner complaints from this community that was built by XYZ builder. They're not going to be as likely to want to approve you. You got to know all that and think in terms of what can go wrong, because so many things, the devil in the details. One little thing could ruin a deal. So it's really, you got to always be thinking, you know, it's nice to be positive and the sun's shining, but if that's all you're thinking all the time, you're going to get burned.
Starting out, we typically receive phone calls from people that are interested in putting a piece of property under contract or have a piece of property under contract, and they call up and say, Andrew, what is the potential that I could get an apartment building on here? Or Andrew, what's the potential I could get a series of townhomes on here? And we typically meet with them, we'll do some investigation of our own, and then we will sit down over the course of an hour, hour and a half, and sort of walk them through what we see as the pitfalls. Okay, such as, the comprehensive plan calls for commercial on this property. It's going to be a heavy lift. Or the comprehensive plan calls for single-family homes on this property at one dwelling unit an acre. It's going to be a heavy lift. And it's really up to you to take all the other information you get from the other consultants and make the decision as to whether or not to move forward. I will say one other thing too about this before I turn it back over to Jerry. When you're working in a buy-right context, the amount of the highest and best use of the land is what an engineer is going to be able to tell you can get on the property, because you're not dealing with, again, political realities. When you're dealing with a legislative process, the amount of homes that you can get or the amount of units you can get on a piece of property or what that thing can sprout is going to be grounded in political reality. So it's important to keep those two things.
And that all relates back to risk. MVR might be the best company in the country with dealing with land risk. They have a formula where they say, I don't want any land risk. I want someone else to take the risk. And this is a big company. It's what, 5th, 7th largest builder in the country? Fourth. That's bullshit. It's four and a half. But we all look at MVR and we can learn something, but it's not easy to do what they've done. But what they do is they say, I'm not going to buy land that's not zoned, because there's a lot of risk in zoning. You might have political, you might have a neighbor, your next door neighbors, a bunch of homeowners that are going to not vote for that council person, and the council person knows that if they approve this land, they're going to be out of their job. So they won't, MVR says, I'm not going to buy land that's not zoned. They go even further. I'm not going to buy land that's not already gone through that preliminary approval subdivision, which is an engineering process. Even if it is approved zoning-wise, there's still a lot of risk involved in, am I going to get 100 lots? Because there's open space requirements, there's wetlands, there's all sorts of things that could change the number of lots I can get. So there's risk involved in the engineering process, even if it's by right. They won't buy land like that. They won't buy land they won't buy land that's not developed, almost always. Because, hey, you bought land, you got your 100 lots or your 500 lots, however many you wanted, everything looks great, but now you find out that you got dirt problems that you weren't able to figure out. They're real good at putting a developer in between them and the purchase. So they say they have people they deal with that are very reliable and skilled at their work. You buy the land, you get the approvals, you develop it, you create final finished lots, we'll then buy it and build homes. But you take all the risk. And we might pay you for that risk. So the developer's happy, but the developer takes the risk. And they've been able to do that for years better than anybody. They don't have to get a lot of debt on their books, because buying the land's the biggest purchase. It's all about risk.
Right.
Their company's all about risk.
Right. And I appreciate the paid political announcement here by Jerry Berman.
I'm hoping he'll hire me.
Who works for MI Homes, and but no, it's a formula that works. for a number of reasons for MVR, but it works. There are other companies that will try and use the same formula, but in a hot market as we are in Northern Virginia with a limited land supply, it doesn't always work to be able to buy finished lots on a takedown the way our program works. There's plenty of land out there for Evergreene and MI and all the other builders that are in this room. So we're gonna go real quick through close on the acquisition. So the contract had some conditions to close. You want to go through those. You know you've gotten your site plan approvals coming up, your record plat, whatever your condition to close is. So you go back to your contract. You say, have these conditions been met and satisfied? If there are entitlement milestones, have they been met at this time? It might be necessary to defer closing until some of these conditions have been satisfied. You might have put that in your contract that you're allowed a 90-day extension period, a 6-month extension period. Extension periods could be free, or they may cost you a dollar amount for that extension period. The Land Act manager will go through, he'll work with the attorneys, the escrow agents, understand the checklist for closing, make sure, again, clear title, very important, any outstanding issues have been addressed that might have come up, post-closing obligations that might be required. The Land Act manager might have to go back and resubmit the acquisition package to corporate for final approval. Maybe you lost lots during the entitlement process. Maybe your contract said you get a minimum yield of 60. You started with 100 and you wound up with 75. Well, your land development costs have gone up because you have less lots that you're spreading your land development costs over. Maybe your brick and mortar costs changed. Maybe you were hit with a proffer during the process that required you to do hardy on the rears when you didn't expect to do hardy plank on the rear, or again, true divided like windows instead of a standard double plane. So you rerun your numbers, make sure you're ready to close, and you close on the property. So I'm just going to try and go through just some quick comments here. So we went through the process from start to finish. We covered a lot of territory. Again, a thorough market analysis at the start. Again, talk to your customer, understand who your customers are, what you're going to build, what the product is, what your sales price is going to be, and what you think you can sell at a pace. How fast are you going to sell this product? Have a vision for the site. Again, try and match who your buyer is with what they need. A target buyer profile. What is that target buyer? Is it entry level, first time, second time? Is it a move down? And then make sure the product aligns with the buyer profile. Again, you go through your land planning effort. Make sure you value engineered it. You've worked through it. You've met with your various consultants. Again, your development cost savings, can I save any money? What's your timeline? Again, making sure that you've got your zoning attorney on board. It takes longer than you think. It takes longer than you think. Always remember that. And make sure you got deep pockets, because you're going to invest a lot of time and money, consultants, and you might not get your entitlements. You might just have to walk away. Go ahead.
How might this process change if a small builder who typically just purchases an existing home that they're going to tear down for their land acquisition, as opposed to buying a piece of land?
So just in one lot where you're going to tear down the house and build a new house, you would go in and probably talk to the planning and zoning office, meet with the county planner, and understand what the process is for demolition permit. You might have to go to DEM, environmental management, or the public works group to get that information. But show them the house you want to build. Have a sketch plan of, my house is going to be 40 feet wide. What are my side yard setbacks? So you go through that same process. You can enlist a civil engineer to help you through that process.
That would be before your civil would be doing the grading plan?
They would probably do an initial concept plan for you to see if the house works.
So, for example, you're going to put model A, your vision is to put model A on this
lot.
Then you would give your civil model A.
You give them a model plan, right, and they cite that on that lot to see if it works, if it meets the R3 zoning district or R2, whatever that zoning code is. So you have your side yard, your front, your rear setbacks, your coverage requirements. And now we have Chesapeake Bay legislation, so we're worried about, we need to require on-lot stormwater management. Even for a single lot, you're gonna have to do some sort of rain garden or some sort of bioswales, bio boxes, somehow take the roof drainage and, again, detain it, treat it before it gets released into the county system.
Never start buying single lots.
No.
You sound very well versed.
Yeah. Okay, so to your point, the civil engineer is probably your first stop. Yeah. Again, you're gonna spend a lot of time, money, and effort, and you might wind up walking away from this. So make sure you got deep pockets and realize what you're getting yourself into. Again, hidden costs or maybe ag tax, again, the impact fees, commissions you're paying to Clark Massey or Long and Foster or somebody else. You might want to negotiate those fees if you have less lots than you originally planned. Again, conditions to close. You might not have all the conditions to close. How can I delay closing in order to fulfill those obligations? And again, choose your partners wisely. Make sure that you both share a common goal and have, again, a contingency plan if things go awry, an exit strategy. Again, a bank, a friend, maybe it's the land seller as your partner. Make sure that you're all aligned with regards to the future outcome.
The questions? This is a whole lot of stuff we covered, and the next session be another opportunity to hear some of this again, just from a different slant. But a lot of this stuff intertwines. Chip.
Great presentation, guys. I was wondering, are these slides going to be available for us?
Yeah, we could make sure you get them.
I have a copy for you.
I think if everyone had their email address, which I think you have to. Yep. Other questions? Yeah.
Just a quick broad spectrum question. With the rezoning issues that you guys have mentioned, that's a total rabbit hole, and it's not for today's conversation, but are you seeing kind of a halt between moving westward and getting larger pieces of property that could potentially be developed, and then like a halting of that?
Well, I think before you even talk about moving westward, there's been a halting period. Because a year and a half ago, I think we talked a little bit last session, a year and a half ago, the law changed in Virginia. It was pushed by the home builders of Virginia in Richmond, where in order to collect the proffers is really the price you pay to get a rezone, impact fees. It's a similar concept. The counties were restricted on how they can do it. The whole process changed. And now they're very hesitant to approve any zoning because they're not sure how they're going to collect their money. They feel a little bit hurt. So zoning has become much more difficult. Andrew, you probably know more than any of us here.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, the proffer reform legislation aside, just back to a macro issue, we have been operating in this region for the last 6 decades under this philosophy in Northern Virginia of go west, young man. There will always be greenfield sites. And I think, and you all could probably elaborate on this, those days are rapidly coming to a close. And it really has nothing to do with proffers, I would say. It has to do with the political realities of what has occurred with the term smart growth, what used to be called growth management, and smart growth, and now sustainability. And when Loudoun County, which was kind of like the last untouched area, kind of downzoned everything in 2003 and then again in 2006, they took the western 2/3 of that county and just downzoned it. You go to Prince William County, which still has some raw dirt. And in 1997, the Board of County Supervisors downzoned what is called the Rural Crescent. And the next jurisdictions out, whether it's Clark, whether it's Fauquier, have long ago, before growth was on their doorstep, further downzoned their property as well, except around certain service areas around Warrenton, Bealton, Remington. So I think in this golden triangle between here, Richmond, Charlottesville, it's going to be very, very difficult to find a lot of good dirt. You might be able to find some in Culpeper, you might be able to find some down in Stafford, and in parts of Spotsy, but this classic notion that we're going to be able to just keep finding greenfield sites in the 3 core jurisdictions in which our building industry operates is rapidly disappearing, which is unfortunate. But
So if you're good at your job, you'll be more valuable.
Or you'll be a dinosaur.
Or a dinosaur.
We'll do extend.
But, you know, one thing I am seeing though is, we've counseled a lot of our clients, and they're doing this, is to start partnering with, you know, I mean, all the easy pickings are done. All the low-hanging fruit is gone. So you really need to start partnering with other non-traditional groups, shopping center owners, you know, where there might be raw dirt and just parking lots that are looking to redevelop, you know. So.
And that's a good point, I think, is everything's changing, so you gotta stay up with the changes. Questions?
I'm actually a realtor, and I have leads in clients that want to sell dirt, so I'm trying to wrap my head around everything you guys are saying. So what does that mean exactly when there are lots available, 40 acres, 155 acres in Aldi, and with the zoning issues, like, is that a potential possibility, and how would that go?
That's a good place to be, right? And you need to reach out, and you could do it through MVBIA, but reach out to all the builders, and they'll figure out very quickly whether or not that property is of value to them. Because all the builders are looking for land. It's hard, like Andrew was saying, it's hard to find good dirt. So if you have it, that's a good thing.
I'll give you my card, and then I'll.
Didn't take long.
Yeah, well, I guess it just speaks to the point. It's, you know what, in educating yourself and going to different builders, getting there, you know, every piece of dirt can fit a builder differently. So,
You know, a good place to start is if you know a builder in the area, tell them what you got and start asking questions. And if they're a good builder, they're gonna help you understand the property, hoping that you'll look at them favorably.
As a realtor, you want to get educated. You want to meet with the counties. You want to, if you want to focus on Loudoun County or Prince William or Stafford, be an expert in those counties. Go to the county governments, meet with the planning and zoning office, understand their comprehensive plan, understand where water and sewer lines are, understand where bad geotechnical material is, where rock is, or marine clays, because those are all things that will limit the constraints on the development of that parcel of ground. So that 100 acres in Aldi may be a really nice farm, but there may not be any water and sewer, and the geotech, the soil material may not be good for perks, may not be good for septic. So all of a sudden, you think you got 100 acres, it may give you I don't know, 10 acre lots, and all of a sudden you really only have three lots because you can only get 3 septic fields approved. So again, as realtors, I think, you know, you want to be an expert. You know, we're experts supposedly in what we do. So we look to realtors when they bring us a piece of real estate. I really don't like educating realtors because
Did you sense that?
you know, so go out, be an expert, understand what you're dealing with.
Lonnie will educate you. Don't go to Howard.
Exactly. I'll educate you.
no, but no, to his point, I mean, that's your business. You brought it up. You've come to this meeting. You're doing proactive things, but 99%, I mean, it's all about wasting time in relationships. You know, I'm not going to waste somebody's time by inflating numbers that I know are not there. Clark's not going to waste my time if he hasn't gotten to a certain point. But you can educate yourself, and the more educated you are, the more time that we will spend or put our resources to it.
And the better job you're doing for the person who owns that property, for
Which
sure.
is the most important.
For sure.
And this brings up a point too. There are multiple clients that have raw dirt and they don't know what to do with it. They end up, and we talked about brokers earlier, but realtors could do this as well. Anyone could do this. Brokers specialize in putting together informational packets that get distributed out to their network. So, you know, maybe 16 different homeowners or home builders or 20 different home builders or developers get these packets. And then over the course of about a month and a half or so, those 16 that elect to respond to it, you know, they will come in and kind of do a beauty contest with the owner and with the broker and with other consultants that the owner has. And then they'll narrow it down and narrow it down again, and then they'll go to terms on an LOI or something like that. But that's a way to get interest in the property out there.
Other questions? Well, thank everyone for coming. Next week and the week after are going to be equally as fun. I hope this was good. And remember, bring in a new member to MVBIA, just one. Everybody, just bring one new member in. And you might even get a free session out of it. Ask Ed. Talk to Ed.
Free session, $50 gift card.
Yeah. It's all good stuff. Thanks for coming.
Thanks.